Hello, everyone. Hello, Central Virginia. And I think we might have some folks probably tuning in from other parts of the country as well, because this has been a highly anticipated and watched race. So we're opening tonight our analysis with Dr. Richard Burke, who's been joining us all evening with some breaking news. Abigail Spanberger has been projected to win the Virginia gubernatorial race, making her the first woman governor in Virginia. I want to just pop right up here real quick. You can see that on our front page, we now have that and our top stories under all of our live updates that you can follow along with while you watch us right now. We know everybody has two devices, or throughout the evening, even after we sign off here. But we will be on here for the next little bit. Eric Phillips, my co-anchor, also joining me. Hi, Eric.
Hey there, D. Yeah, we got lots to talk about tonight.
So much.
I mean, we can start with the breaking news, but you know what I really want to talk about.
We'll get to it. We'll get to it. We will get to it. Eric has been a buzz talking about some of these election results. So we'll get through the main key races, but also some of those hotly contested, competitive delegates races that we've been covering as well. But let's get right in. Spanberger, next governor. She was widely favored, but this margin we're seeing right now, still at this point, I'm going to refresh this page over here, and I'll pull it up in a second. But the margin we're seeing, even without all of the ballots counted at this point, pretty wide, right, Dr. Burke?
Yeah, I mean, so if it looks like we're about 11 percentage point as a margin, which to me would be a strong victory for Spanberger if she does get more than, say, 10 percentage points. I mean, I think many people expected that Spanberger was going to win just because of the sort of the fundamentals for this election, given that President Trump is quite unpopular and people's perceptions of the economy are not too positive. So I think a lot of people thought that Spanberger was going to win, but the margins that she's winning by are quite impressive. And as you mentioned, Deanna, we're looking at down ballot races because a lot of people, they're voting in House of Delegates elections, but they're thinking about the governor's race. And I believe there are 8 districts in the House of Delegates where there was a Republican who was serving as the incumbent House of Delegate, but where actually Vice President Kamala Harris won those districts. And so if Spanberger had a really impressive night, we could be seeing 8 or so districts flipping in the House of Delegates, which already leans towards the Democratic Party, with the Democrats holding 51 seats. So I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see, just how large of a margin Spanberger ultimately walks away with tonight, but also what impacts that's having down ballot in these down ballot races.
And I'm just refreshing some of those down ballot races right now, and we'll get to those in just a moment. But I want to maybe ask you, when you talk about how much people were paying attention to the governor's race,
right,
a lot of people always say for elections, it's the economy, stupid.
Yeah.
How much of a role do you really think this played, particularly with seeing such a wide margin?
Yeah. So I think perceptions of the economy are really important. I would say that probably the biggest indicator as to how a candidate was going to do tonight was presidential approval. And a lot of times, presidential approval can be influenced if the country's at war, for instance. That can influence presidential approval. But right now, I mean, President Trump's approval is not high. There's polls that have been done by The Economist and YouGov, which shows that President Trump's net approval is something like negative 18 percentage points, meaning that there's people are more likely to disapprove of President Trump than approve of him by 18 percentage points. In Virginia, 16 percentage points. It's not good, and most of that is because of the economy. When we look at where people are concerned about President Trump's administration, what you see is that the large majority of people are concerned about the prices of the cost of living. Inflation continues to be a really important issue for voters. They're worried about job creation. They're also worried about, spending in Washington and how that might be affecting them here in Virginia, right? We see a government shutdown right now, which has had big implications for Virginia. But we also saw early on this year in 2025, DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, cutting federal funding, laying off federal workers. This can have a big impact in a state like Virginia where there are a lot of federal workers. And we also saw with the budget debates over the summer, the one big beautiful bill talks about cutting Medicaid, which could leave hundreds of thousands of Virginians uninsured. So there's a lot of anxiety, I would say, about President Trump's administration right now, and I think the voters have made that clear in electing Spanberger by fairly wide margins here.
Yeah, and we see the commercials every day over and over again. The Spanberger campaign really pounced on the fact that Winsome Earl-Sears had that hot mic where she talked about the layoffs, and everybody gets laid off sometimes.
Right.
That really did not sit well with a lot of Virginia voters, especially those who had lost their jobs because of DOJ, those who were impacted. And we saw that the Spanberger campaign really kept hounding that issue all the way to the finish line.
Right. Indeed. One question that I have where the gubernatorial election is concerned, how big of a difference is it going to make having the first female governor? I mean, of course it was going to go that way either way because you were talking about Earl-Sears or Spanberger. But from a historical standpoint and from a practical standpoint, how big of a difference is it going to make having a first female governor in the state of Virginia?
Yeah, well, I can talk a little bit about the election, and so people study what they call candidate traits, and one of which is gender. And the question is, do female candidates have a harder time getting elected? Now, that was not going to be an issue tonight because we had 2 women on the ballot.
Right. Yeah.
But one thing that has been discussed is people talk about gender stereotypes, and there's this stereotype out there that women office holders are less likely to be tough on crime in the case of being a governor, right? They're less likely to protect citizens from unauthorized immigrants and so forth, right? That they might be, I guess we would say, softer. And what you see with Abigail Spanberger as a candidate is that she can rely on a background in law enforcement, having served in the CIA for, I believe, about 8 years or so. So she has this law enforcement background, which in some ways goes against certain stereotypes that we have about female candidates. It's interesting to note that that's the same case with Miss Earl-Sears as well, having served in the Marines.
Right.
We've actually have seen a number of candidates like this where they rely, women candidates in particular, where they rely on law enforcement or military background as a way to counter certain stereotypes about women in office.
Kind of toughen them up.
Yeah. And this is actually a question that I asked of another political analyst, Professor Rich Marr. I believe this was either last year or the year before that, about the number, not just the number of female candidates, but the number of female candidates with military backgrounds, with police backgrounds. And so that's interesting that you bring that up, that women are pairing those two to show that they can be tough, right? But sometimes it seems like what some people did respond to, at least in what we saw from some of the kind of final days interviews with folks, is that some people wanted Spanberger's what they considered softer touch. Like one of the things that attracted them to her was that they felt like she has this CIA background, this experience, but that they felt like she had this empathy that they were really attracted to.
But is it fair that women have to try to ride this line that guys don't have to ride?
No.
I mean, you want her to be tough. You want her to have the background in either military or policing to show that she can be hard. But where's that softer side that we want from the women that they inherently should have? You're trying to fit too many things at the same time, and do men have to do that?
No, because nobody's asking men to be softer, right? Nobody's asking a lot of male candidates to be more empathetic. No one's asking male candidates, how do you balance taking care of your children and being a politician, right? But there are some inherent challenges for women. I mean, it wasn't even until recently that there was a bathroom in Congress that was closer for the female politicians, and any breastfeeding mothers had to schlep all the way across the Capitol just to pump, and so that was within the last 5 or 6 years. So,
and one thing I would say about this question of recruiting women with certain backgrounds to run for office, I think that people who work in parties and in political campaigns, they have this sense that there's a gender stereotype out there that women candidates have to address, right, through their personal background. To to me, I don't know how true it is that female candidates are more likely to be punished because they're women. A lot of the research suggests that partisanship is really what's doing a lot of the work in election campaigns. Now, it might be helpful to have this background, but I'm not too sure if it's necessary, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. So I want to move a little bit to check out some of these other key races. Right now, we have 48% reporting with the lieutenant governor's race between Hashmi and Reed. I do want to talk about that in a moment, but I really want to talk about this attorney general's race because I know Eric Phillips really wants to talk about it too. Right now, we've got about 48% reporting. Jay Jones still narrowly in the lead there. Tanik, do you know, has AP called the race for the lieutenant governor's race? I know we're seeing some projections in other places. Tanik? Do you know if the AP has called the Hashmi Reed race? No. So we don't have that. We go by the Associated Press. So we would be waiting on them to make that call. We have seen some calls in this race in other places, but we are waiting on the Associated Press to make their call. They've got decades, a lot of history behind them and the accuracy of their calls. But going back to this, let's go back to this AG's race. People were, the early polls had Jones with a fairly comfortable lead over Miyares, even though he was the incumbent. Was that for the same reasons that we saw Spanberger having this comfortable lead the whole time?
Right. I mean, it's just sort of, right now we have a Republican in the White House and we don't like the way things are going and we're going to elect a Democrat to be the attorney general. And, I think that's what was driving Jones's favorability for sure, especially early on in the campaign.
Okay, but then something changed.
Something did change, right? And we have this.
The text message many voters likely know at this point with his jokes about killing the House, former House Speaker Todd Gilbert, some reinforcement of a purported phone call conversation where he talked about their children dying in his wife Jennifer's arms to affect policy change, saying something along the lines of that's the only way certain people move on policy is when it happens to them, when they're personally impacted. And that really drove a lot of media conversation. It drove some of our conversations when we were talking about debate questions and what needed to be asked. What do these, obviously we only have 54% reporting right now, but what do these results so far tell you?
Yeah, so one thing I think is really important to keep in mind is that a lot of times we watch media and we get the idea, we get this image in our head of the absolutely loyal partisan, the person who absolutely loves, Donald Trump or absolutely loves Vice President Kamala Harris, and they have no reservations whatsoever, right? We get this image in our head. But the reality of it is a lot of voters are what we would call ambivalent. Right? They have some thoughts about candidates that are good. They have some thoughts about we could be talking about the same candidate here. They have some, evaluations of the candidate that are favorable for that candidate, some evaluations that are not so favorable. So we take a case like Jay Jones. A lot of voters, they're going to have especially if they're concerned about what's going on in Washington, if they're supportive of Abigail Spanberger, they are going to feel favorable about Jay Jones because of where he stands on national politics, and that's going to be a plus for him. But what's going to be a negative is these news stories that really call into question his character, right? That he would talk about killing a colleague in the legislature, that he would talk about harming his family, even in joke. It just seems to many people to be a little bit too far. Not to mention the speeding ticket that he had going 160 miles an hour. For a lot of people, even if they vote for Jay Jones, his character is a question mark. Yeah. And they voted for him not saying this is the greatest guy ever, right? Probably hoping that he surrounds himself with people, if they did feel that his character was questionable, who do have strong character. But at the end of the day, they probably said to themselves, this is a person who has made it very clear that he's going to stand up to President Trump, that he's going to define his job as Attorney General as being the representative of the state of Virginia, suing the White House, challenging federal policy. And that's how they casted their ballot, right? And so they leaned more towards what they saw as the positive side, the light side, I guess.
So what I hear you saying is that their
Jones.
dislike for President Trump was greater than their dislike of what he did or what he allegedly.
Right.
Their dislike for President Trump was greater than their dislike for what Jones did. Yes.
Yes, and Eric, that you say that you just defined a really important concept that political scientists talk about now. We call it negative partisanship, which is the idea that it's not so much that people love their own party. A lot of people are going to vote for Abigail Spanberger, and they're not going to say, oh, the Democratic Party is the greatest thing ever. They're going to vote for Abigail Spanberger because they're super scared about Republicans who they see as threats to democracy and so on and so forth. And so, I mean, the same could be true in the case, we're thinking about a candidate here of Jay Jones. They're more concerned about the threat that they hope that Jay Jones will protect them from as Attorney General than questions of Jay Jones's character.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, we see that in other candidates as well, even President Trump, some would say. We are running out of time. So before we do, I do want to get to some of these down ballot races. Let's do a quick update of the Hashmi Reed race. We still have Hashmi with a comfortable lead, 54% reporting. I will take a quick look at the map when we start talking about the delegates races to see where the breakdown of where votes are left. But let's take a look at some of those down ballot races. So we have District 73, the early Meta race. This race is looking like we have in the lead and possibly winning that race. Tanik, do you know if that's been called? It's not been called. Has not been called. We still also have ballots that need to be counted in terms of absentee ballots as well, and potentially provisional ballots for those people who same day registered. District 75 is where we have the Doherty Coiner race. Coiner, the incumbent there, is losing currently to Doherty by a 5% gap there with 59% reporting. And then we have down here in District 82, the Kim versus Kim race, as we've all come to know it here. We have Kimberly Pope Adams with quite a comfortable lead there with 87% reporting. The last election, that was a tight race, the Kim v. Kim race. So it does not look like that's going to be the same here. And this could be another thing that you were talking about, Dr. Burke, with a couple of Republicans here, incumbent Republicans, who are going to lose their seats potentially.
Yeah.
And so what does this follow what you've been saying about the other things where we might have seen some split ticket voting at the very top of the ballot, but we weren't seeing that down ballot? Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, the reality of it is, there's this, some people tend to think that because House of Delegates are, some people would imagine that our representatives in the states are actually closer to constituents, because a House of Delegate in Virginia represents about, 60,000 or so people, maybe. It's not a lot of people. And so you would imagine, I'm going to know my House of Delegate. But the reality of it is that, delegates don't appear in the news, right? For a lot of people, unless they're a neighbor or a friend or a colleague, they don't have any idea who House of Delegates are, right?
Yeah.
So they cast their
Some
ballot.
People don't know who their own delegate is.
Right. I mean, it's interesting. Like, now we're talking about members of Congress. I think that like 33% of people can name who their member of Congress is. So, I mean, never mind once you get to a House of Delegate. And so for a lot of people, it's just, choose, you pick the letter that you like early on, and then you go down the ballot and you keep choosing that letter.
Well, this has all been really interesting. There is so much more analysis to come. We'll have more at 11 o'clock tonight. We'll have more on WRC.com throughout the night. Really appreciate you joining us.
Thanks.
Dr. Burke, any
Thanks for
final
having me.
thoughts you want to leave folks with?
It's going to be a really important election. I think everybody knows that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's watching this election to kind of read what is the future of the Democratic Party in particular. To what degree is potentially Abigail Spanberger, now Governor-elect Spanberger, going to be a face of the Democratic Party moving forward. So I think it's going to have huge even though it's a race that's taking place only for Virginia offices, it's really going to have huge national implications.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, there was so much press at their watch parties, they couldn't even allow more people in, and that's national and international press. So we will continue to watch the other races that have yet to be called. And so stay tuned to our social media and our website for the latest. And you'll hear more from Dr. Burke tonight at 11. Thanks.